Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
My uncle cleared out my office for his son. You'll understand. Just be flexible, he told me. So I complied and walked out. By that afternoon, breakdown calls were piling up. Inspectors were losing it. And my uncle was blowing up my phone, desperate for the nephew he'd just erased. Sup, Reddit. I worked for my uncle's company for 8 years. 6 months ago, he gave my job to his son. They cleared my office in front of the whole shop and handed it to my cousin. No warning, no meeting, just my uncle's smug smile, a cardboard box. I was told to be flexible and move out the same hour. What they didn't get was how much depended on me showing up that afternoon. Now let me back up. Name's Owen, 26 male. I run operations for my uncle's commercial elevator service and inspection company. RAN. Whatever. We've got about 30 techs, a fleet of service vans that smell like hydraulic fluid and regret, and contracts with hospitals, office towers, hotels, and apartment complexes across the metro area. When your elevator breaks down at 2 a.m. in a 20-story building full of residents who suddenly can't reach their apartments, someone has to coordinate that response. For 8 years, that someone was me. I didn't start there as operations manager, started as a helper right out of high school, riding along with techs, learning the trade from the ground up. I did the midnight calls, did the holiday emergencies, did the inspections where you're crawling through machine rooms in 100-degree heat because some building manager waited until his certification was 3 days from expiring. The thing about elevator work is that when it's done right, nobody thinks about it. People step in, push a button, step out. They don't think about the cables, the hydraulics, the safety systems. What they really don't see is the guy who noticed a worn sheave before it became a lawsuit, or talked a city inspector out of red tagging a hospital's freight elevator during a supply delivery, or kept relationships with building managers so solid they'd call us first even when competitors underbid. I had a system, a binder with every building contact, every elevator's maintenance history, every inspector's quirks and schedules. I knew which techs worked best with which properties. Hector was magic with older hydraulic units and could diagnose problems by ear, like some kind of elevator whisperer. Paulie was the guy you sent to difficult building managers, because he had this gift for making angry people feel heard, without actually agreeing with them. I knew which parts suppliers could overnight an obsolete relay, and which ones would say yes to everything, and then take 6 weeks to deliver. Had a guy in Toledo who could source discontinued components that officially didn't exist anymore. Had a contact at a hydraulic shop who'd rebuild a cylinder on 24-hour turnaround if I asked nicely. I knew the inspection calendar for every unit we serviced down to the week. Knew which city inspectors were by the book, and which ones would work with you if you showed respect. Knew that Inspector Harold wanted his paperwork in a specific order and would fail you for a crooked staple, while Inspector Price would give you a break if you were honest about what needed fixing. City compliance is everything in this business. One missed inspection and you're dealing with violations, angry property owners, and insurance people who don't laugh at excuses. An elevator that fails certification can't run until it passes. For a residential high-rise or a hospital, that's not an inconvenience. That's chaos. That's the thing about this business nobody talks about. It's not just turning wrenches. It's relationships. And that stuff doesn't transfer in a handoff meeting. It takes years to build and seconds to destroy. That morning started normal. I was reviewing the week's dispatch schedule, drinking my second cup of gas station coffee, when Gina from the front office walked in without knocking. Gina handled admin and whatever HR stuff a company our size needed, which mostly meant making sure people got paid and keeping my uncle's calendar organized. She was also my uncle's fiercely loyal assistant, who'd worked for him for 15 years and would take his side in any dispute without hesitation. She set a banker's box down on my desk like she was serving me court papers. Behind her stood my cousin Wesley. Wes. Fresh polo shirt. Clean hands that had never touched a hydraulic seal. Looking around my office like he was already mentally rearranging the furniture. We're going to need this office today. Wesley's going to be handling operations going forward. I waited for a punchline. None came. Wes stepped closer with that smirk I'd known since we were kids. The golden child energy. The one who got a car at 16 while I was riding the bus to my shifts. The one who'd gone to business school on his dad's dime while I was pulling doubles to help my mom keep her house after my dad died. The one who'd spent maybe 8 months total at the company over the years, mostly learning the business, which meant showing up late and leaving early. I asked who approved this. Gina said my uncle signed off that morning. No meeting, no transition plan, no nothing. The shop guys had stopped moving. I could feel eyes on the doorway. Word travels fast when you've only got 30 people. By now, everyone within earshot knew something was going down, even if they didn't know what. I saw Hector freeze mid-step near the parts counter, coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Paulie walked past the doorway twice in 30 seconds. Wes reached for the nameplate on my desk, the one I'd earned. He actually said out loud, "I'll get someone to update this." I picked it up myself and placed it in the box. Gina started removing items from my shelves without asking. My framed certifications, the maintenance logs, a photo of me and my dad from 8 years ago, taken at my first job site a month before the heart attack. Then she picked up my binder, the one with every contact, every schedule, every relationship I'd built over 8 years. She set it on the desk in front of Wes like it was company property, which technically it was. But still, "Your uncle wants to see you." I walked down the hall. My uncle, Vincent, was sitting behind his desk with that look he gets when he's already made a decision. Same look he'd had at family dinners for 30 years. Same look he'd had when he told my mom he couldn't help with Dad's medical bills, because the business was tight that year, while driving a new truck. "You'll understand," he said. "Wesley's ready to step up. Family business needs family leadership. Be flexible. Family leadership." That was rich coming from the guy who'd let me run his operation for nearly a decade while he played golf and took long lunches. I didn't argue. "Where am I supposed to work?" He waved vaguely. "There's a desk in the back, near the parts room. It's temporary." The desk in the back was a folding table we used for sorting small components. It was next to a shelf of hydraulic fittings and directly under a vent that leaked whenever it rained. Right. I went back to what was now Wes's office, picked up my box, and walked out past my cousin, who was already spinning in my chair like a kid. No one said a word. I walked through the shop, past the dispatch board, past the tech's loading vans. Hector looked up and gave me a nod that said everything. Paulie just shook his head. The parking lot was hot and quiet. I made it to my truck and sat in the driver's seat, holding a box of my life like some guy who'd just been downsized after a merger. They'd just erased me and expected me to accept a folding table as a consolation prize. I stared at the chain link fence and thought about what was happening inside. Wes was probably adjusting the monitor, checking email he didn't understand. He had no idea that in about 2 hours, the afternoon emergency calls would start coming in, and I was going to be absolutely nowhere near them. That's when the first call came. Then another. Then another. The phone buzzed in my hand like it was alive. I watched the screen. Let it ring. Early that afternoon, the calls started coming faster. I didn't answer any of them. I just watched the names scroll by like credits at the end of a movie nobody wanted to see. Dispatch. Parts counter. Hector. Some building managers. Then Gina, 3 times in 10 minutes. When I finally picked up, her voice was tight. "Where are you?" "Not at my folding table, if that's what you're asking. We've got a call back at Mercy General. The freight elevator. They're saying it's stuck between floors with equipment inside." Mercy General, our biggest hospital contract. I'd spent 2 years building that relationship with their facilities director, a perpetually stressed guy named Glenn, who'd been burned by 2 other elevator companies before I convinced him to give us a shot. The freight elevator was a 40-year-old hydraulic beast that I knew better than some of my relatives, which, given today's events, wasn't saying much. "Wesley's handling operations now. Route it through him." Pause. "He doesn't know anything about that unit. That does sound like a problem. Can you just—" "Gina, you walked into my office with a cardboard box. You handed my job to a guy who thinks a sheave is something you do at the beach. Now you want me to fix what he can't handle?" Silence. "I'll think about it. Maybe after dinner." I hung up and set the phone face down. Inside that building, chaos was brewing. Outside, I was watching a hawk circle the parking lot across the street, wondering if it was hunting or just enjoying the view. I drove home. The phone kept buzzing. I kept not answering. It was almost relaxing. The silence inside my house felt different from the noise I'd left behind. Cleaner. My dog Ruger, a 5-year-old German Shepherd, looked at me like he knew something was wrong. Dogs always know. I made a sandwich, sat on my back porch, thought about the look on Wes's face when Gina had handed him my binder. For 8 years, everything had moved because I moved it. The dispatches, the emergency responses, the parts orders, the inspection schedules. I was the engine nobody saw until it stopped running. Now they could see what the silence sounded like. Late afternoon, I finally checked voicemail. I was curious. First message, Glenn from Mercy General, sounding like someone had lit his desk on fire. "Your guy showed up, but he's completely lost. The delivery crew's been stuck for an hour. I need you to call me back. Now." Second message, Hector. Man, I don't know what happened, but Wes just sent 2 texts to the wrong address. We've got callbacks stacking up. This is bad. Third message. A property manager at Riverside Towers. This is the 3rd time I've called. We have an inspection scheduled for tomorrow, and nobody can confirm. If you people miss this window, we're rebidding the contract. 4th message. Wes, trying to sound calm and failing. Hey, so the dispatch system isn't really making sense to me. Can you call me back? Also, where do we keep the override keys? The override keys were in my desk. In a drawer Wes probably hadn't opened yet because it required knowing the drawer existed. 5th message. Uncle Vinny. Clipped. Irritated. Call me! My gut was telling me to rush back, fix everything, prove them wrong. But that's what they expected. That's what would make this all go away quietly. So I didn't. I grilled a burger. Threw a ball for Ruger until my arm got tired. Watched the sun go down. I slept through the night for the first time in months. No 2 a.m. calls, no emergencies, just silence. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Hector marked urgent. Mercy is threatening to pull the contract. 3 inspections got missed yesterday. Wes tried to order parts without account numbers. Polly almost walked out. This place is falling apart. I showered, got dressed, made coffee, and I let them burn a little longer. Later, I got the full rundown from Hector and Polly. They came to my place that weekend with takeout and stories that would have been hilarious if they weren't also describing the destruction of a business I'd spent 8 years building. The Mercy General situation blew up fast. Freight elevator stuck between floors. Delivery crew trapped with a cart full of surgical supplies. Wes got the call, stared at the dispatch board like he'd never seen it before, and sent 2 techs who'd never worked that building. Those techs spent an hour troubleshooting the wrong problem. They didn't know that particular elevator had a temperamental door interlock sensor that failed in a specific way every few years. I knew because I'd diagnosed it twice before. I'd trained Hector on it specifically. But Hector was across town on another job because Wes had dispatched him there first. Glenn, the facility's director, called the office 4 times. Wes kept saying it was being handled. Glenn finally called me directly, which is why I had that voicemail. The delivery crew sat in a metal box for 90 minutes before Hector heard what was happening on the radio, abandoned his other job, and drove over to fix it in 15 minutes. 90 minutes. For a problem I could have talked someone through in 10. Glenn was beyond furious. He'd gone to bat for us when his board wanted to hire a bigger company. He'd trusted me specifically. Now some kid he'd never met was telling him everything was fine while his surgical supply chain sat stuck between floors. But that wasn't even the worst part. While Mercy was melting down, Wes managed to create 3 other disasters at the same time. Disaster 1. The Riverside Towers inspection. Annual certification required by the city. Miss the window and the elevators get red tagged. For a 20-story residential building, that means residents can't use the elevators until an inspector comes back, which can take weeks. Wes never confirmed the appointment. Didn't know he was supposed to. The inspector showed up, waited 40 minutes, left, logged it as a no-show. The property manager, a woman named Claire who I'd worked with for 6 years, called the office 20 times that day. Wes kept sending her to voicemail because he was dealing with emergencies. She was the emergency. Disaster 2. Parts orders. We had 4 units waiting on components. Relays, door operators, a hydraulic seal I'd already sourced from my guy in Toledo. The orders were sitting in my email, queued up, ready to process. All Wes had to do was click send. He didn't know they existed. He didn't check my email. He didn't even know my password. The parts sat. The units stayed broken. Building managers started asking questions. Disaster 3. Polly almost quit. Polly had been with the company for 12 years. Solid tech, great with people, never complained. But when Wes tried to tell him how to handle a callback Polly had done 100 times, Polly asked where Wes had gotten his certification. Wes said he didn't need certification because he was management now. Polly walked to his van, sat there for 15 minutes, and called me. "I'm done," he said. "I can't work for this guy." I talked him off the ledge, told him to give it a few days, told him I was handling it. What I didn't tell him was that I was handling it by doing absolutely nothing. The chaos kept spreading. Emergency calls came in and got misrouted. Techs showed up to jobs without the right parts because nobody had updated the inventory system. A hotel guest got stuck in an elevator at 11 p.m. because Wes dispatched a tech who was already on another job 40 minutes away. The hotel manager called Uncle Vinny directly at midnight. Vinny, who hadn't taken a service call in a decade, had no idea what to tell him. He tried to reach Wes, who'd gone home. Tried to reach me. I was asleep, peacefully. By the second morning, the whole operation was falling apart like a shopping cart with one bad wheel. Then the worst call came in. A building manager in the medical district called to report that we'd missed a scheduled maintenance visit. Missed maintenance means the certification lapsed. Lapsed certification means the city can shut down the elevators. For a medical building with patients who can't use stairs, that's not an inconvenience. That's lawyers. That's liability. That's the kind of thing that makes insurance companies send very formal letters. The building manager was a guy named Phil, who I'd known for 4 years. Good guy. Patient. But even patient people have limits. I've been trying to reach someone for 2 days, he told me later. Your cousin kept saying he'd call me back. He never called me back. I've got elderly patients on the 4th floor who can't do stairs. What am I supposed to do? Install a fireman's pole? Hector texted me updates like a war correspondent reporting from a collapsing front line. Missed callbacks. Angry building managers. Techs frustrated and confused. Parts that should have been ordered days ago. An inspection calendar that nobody was tracking. By day 3, Claire from Riverside Towers had made good on her threat. She sent a formal letter to Uncle Vinny, terminating our contract. 7 years of work. Gone. And Mercy General's Glenn Ostrowski scheduled a call with my uncle to discuss the future of our partnership. In hospital administrator speak, that means, we're firing you and we want you to know it's personal. Someone finally asked the question they'd been avoiding. Can we get him back? Notice the phrasing. Not apologize to him. Not admit we were wrong. Just get him back, like I was a tool that had been misplaced. That told me everything I needed to know about how they still saw me. I didn't respond right away. Not because I was punishing them, okay, maybe a little, but because the moment wasn't ripe. If I stepped in now, I'd be a patch. Temporary fix. Useful until things calmed down, then quietly shuffled back to my folding table. I needed the failure to finish showing itself. That third evening, everything got worse. A downtown office tower had an elevator failure during business hours. People stuck, building management furious, and Wes dispatched a tech who was already handling 2 other emergencies. The tech, a newer guy named Marco, who was still learning the ropes, had to choose which fire to fight. He chose wrong. The office tower sat for 3 hours. The property management company sent a very official-looking letter about contract violations. Meanwhile, the parts backlog was turning into a parts crisis. Units sat broken because components hadn't been ordered. Building managers started asking why their elevators weren't getting fixed. Wes kept saying things were in process, without knowing what that meant. And Paulie finally did walk out. Not permanently. He came back 2 days later, but he spent an entire shift sitting in his van in a parking lot instead of running callbacks because, in his words, I'm not taking orders from a guy who doesn't know the difference between a relay and a resistor. Hector called me that night. This is a disaster. Vinny's losing it. Wes is in over his head and won't admit it. We're going to lose everything you built. I know. So come back. Fix it. Not yet. Why not? Because if I come back now, nothing changes. They'll remember that Wes had a rough week. They'll tell themselves it was just a learning curve. Uncle Vinny will convince himself that I panicked and everything would have been fine. Hector was quiet for a second. So you're letting it burn. I'm letting them understand what they actually had. The hard way. Late that night, my uncle called. I let it ring through to voicemail. His message was shorter than I expected. We need to talk. Call me. I listened to it twice. Heard something I hadn't heard from Uncle Vinny in 30 years of knowing him. Uncertainty. Good. The next morning, I took Ruger for a long walk. Made a real breakfast for once. Eggs, toast, the whole thing. Sat on my porch and watched the neighborhood wake up. A guy 3 houses down was loading his truck for work. Kids waiting for the school bus at the corner. Lady across the street watering her flowers like nothing in the world was wrong. Meanwhile, my phone had 55 unread messages, and my uncle's business was bleeding money because he wanted to play king. I thought about all the times I'd dropped everything when the phone rang. All the holidays cut short, dinners interrupted, sleep sacrificed. 8 years of being the guy who made sure everything worked. 8 years of we need you, and can you handle this? And you're the only one who knows. And my reward? A cardboard box and a smug, you'll understand. No, I understood plenty now. I understood that being reliable means nothing to people who've never had to be reliable themselves. I understood that family is a word people use when they want something from you. That afternoon, I called Uncle Vinny back. He picked up immediately. Thanks for calling. What do you need? Long pause. We're having some issues with the transition. Issues. I let that word hang there. He switched gears. Started talking about family. Legacy. how Wesley just needed time to learn, how I could help mentor him, be a resource, support his development. I listened without interrupting, let him talk himself in circles. When he finally ran out of excuses, I asked one question. Who's running operations right now? He didn't answer right away. That was my answer. Can you come in and help get things back on track? Help is vague. Then what would it take? There it was. The question that changed everything. My authority has to be clear. No decisions on dispatch, parts, inspections, or accounts without my sign-off. Full access restored. My office back. Not a folding table. And a raise. 20% effective immediately. Plus an on-call stipend and a per-call rate for emergency response, because I've been taking 2 a.m. calls for 8 years without extra pay. He started to interrupt. I'm not done. Everything in writing. Title, reporting structure, authority boundaries, and Wes reports to me, not alongside me. That's a lot too. The Mercy contract alone is worth about 80 grand a year. You're about to lose it. Riverside is already gone. That's another 25. You've got 3 buildings threatening to walk, a parts crisis that's going to cost you in overtime and penalties, and Paulie, your best customer-facing tech, almost quit because your son doesn't know what a relay is. Silence. You cleared my office in front of the entire shop. You gave my job to Wesley without a conversation. You humiliated me. Now you want me to fix what I didn't break? This is family business. No, this is business. You made it clear what family means to you when you handed me that box. More silence. 20% is steep. So is losing 6 figures in contracts because you wanted to play Dynasty. He said he needed to think about it. Take your time. I hear Riverside already started reaching out to competitors. Continental Elevator. They've been wanting that account for years. I hung up. 3 hours later, Gina texted me. Your uncle wants you here tomorrow morning. He says he'll meet your terms. I didn't respond. Let them wait a little longer. I walked into the shop the next morning like I'd never left. Same truck, same parking spot, same nod to Hector, who was loading his van and grinned when he saw me like Christmas had come early. The place felt different, tense. Techs moving carefully, avoiding eye contact with the office. The dispatch board looked like a crime scene. Sticky notes everywhere, callbacks circled in red and black. The organized system I'd maintained for years turned into chaos. Paulie caught me in the hallway. He didn't say anything, just grabbed my shoulder, nodded once, and walked away. I went straight to my old office. Wes was still there. On the phone, laptop open, papers scattered everywhere, my binder open in front of him with tabs and highlights like he'd been trying to crack some ancient code. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. He stood up fast when he saw me, knocked over a coffee cup, which spilled across several papers that looked important. Dad didn't tell me you were coming in. That tracks. He doesn't tell me things either. I set my bag down on the desk. You'll want to move your stuff. He looked toward the window where Uncle Vinny was watching from the shop floor with his arms crossed. Wes made eye contact with his father. Vinny looked away. That was everything I needed. Wes gathered his laptop, grabbed a handful of papers without organizing them, and walked out without another word. I noticed he took my chair with him for about 3 steps before realizing how that would look and awkwardly pushing it back. He stopped at the door and turned around. Then he just looked at me with this expression, like someone who just realized the game had rules he didn't know existed. Then he left. I closed the door and sat down. First thing, Mercy General. I called Glenn directly. He answered cold. Yeah? Glenn, it's me. I'm back. Pause. The ice cracked a little. You're back. What on earth happened over there? Internal stuff. It's sorted now. Tell me what you need. He laid it out. The freight elevator was acting up again. Same issue. Never fully fixed. 2 passenger units needed inspection. And he was still furious about the stuck delivery crew. I told him Hector would be there within 2 hours. I'd personally look at the freight unit by end of week. And I apologized. Real apology. The kind where you admit someone trusted you and you let them down. He was quiet. Then, one more slip up and we're rebidding. Got it. I spent the next 4 hours putting out fires. Called Claire at Riverside. Too late to save the contract. She'd already signed with Continental. But I apologized personally and told her I understood. She said if we ever got our act together, she'd think about coming back. That was more than I expected. Called the medical district building manager. Scheduled emergency maintenance for that afternoon. Sent Hector, who knew the building, with specific instructions. Processed the parts orders that had been sitting dead for a week. Called my guy in Toledo directly. Explained the situation. Got him to rush the most critical components. Called Inspector Harold's office about the missed Riverside inspection. Couldn't save that one, but I smoothed things over for future scheduling. Harold actually said he was sorry to see us lose the account, fixed the dispatch board, reassigned callbacks, updated the rotation. By noon, the chaos was starting to look like something resembling order. Uncle Vinny showed up in my doorway around 11. He stood there like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to sit. Things look better already. They should. I've been doing this for 8 years. He pulled out an envelope. Here's what we talked about. I opened it. Read through. 20% raise effective immediately. On-call stipend plus a per-call rate for after-hours emergencies. Title formalized as Operations Director with clear authority over dispatch, inspections, parts, and account management. Reporting directly to him. Wes reassigned to Field Operations Support, which was corporate speak for riding along with techs and learning from the ground up. Wes isn't going to like field work. Wesley will do what needs to be done for the business. First time I'd ever heard him not automatically take Wes's side. Interesting. One more thing. I hadn't planned to say this, but it came out. The next time you want to make a change to operations, you talk to me first. Not around me, not over me. To me. We clear? He didn't respond right away. His jaw tightened. Uncle Vinny wasn't used to being told anything. But then he nodded. Once. Clear. He left. I spent the rest of the day doing damage control. Some relationships were salvageable, some weren't. Riverside was gone. One of the downtown office towers was evaluating options, which meant they'd probably leave within 6 months. But Mercy stayed. The medical district stayed. Most of the residential buildings stayed. Polly came back that afternoon, walked into my office, saw me behind my desk, and smiled. Good to have you back, boss. Good to be back. You done having your meltdown? Depends. Is the other guy still giving orders? The other guy is going to be learning how to change door operators for the next 6 months. Polly's smile got wider. Then yeah, I'm good. Hector stopped by before his afternoon run. You know Wes isn't going to just accept this, right? I know. And your uncle's going to be weird about it. I know that too. So what's the plan? The plan is to make myself so essential that trying to replace me becomes unthinkable. Again, but this time with documentation. Hector nodded. Smart. I've been doing this 8 years without writing anything down. That's what made it easy for them to think anyone could do it. Not anymore. By evening, the shop had settled. Techs knew their assignments. Callbacks were routed properly. The inspection calendar was updated. I shut down my computer and looked around the office. Same walls. But something had shifted. I'd walked out holding a box. I'd walked back holding leverage. The next few weeks were a masterclass in watching people adjust to new reality. Wes did not take his demotion well. He showed up the first few days in his field support role wearing the same clothes he'd worn to the office, apparently not realizing that crawling around elevator machine rooms required different footwear than Italian loafers. He ruined 2 pairs of shoes before Polly finally told him to buy some work boots. Polly, by the way, was assigned to be Wes's mentor. This was my call. Petty? Maybe. But Polly was patient enough not to murder him and direct enough to not baby him. Perfect combination. The first time Wes tried to tell Polly how to handle a callback, Polly just stared at him for about 10 seconds without blinking. Then he went back to work like Wes hadn't said anything. Wes tried again. Polly looked at him and said, real calm. When you can name 3 components in an elevator machine room without Googling, we'll talk. Wes complained to his dad. Vinny told him to figure it out. That was new. The second week, Wes showed up with actual work boots. Still new, still shiny, but work boots. Progress. The third week, he got his first callback where he had to actually do something. A residential building, stuck door, basic fix. A roller that had jumped the track. Polly walked him through it step by step, while Wes sweated and fumbled, and eventually got it working. When they got back to the shop, Wes looked exhausted. His polo was stained. His new boots were scuffed. And for the first time since I'd known him, he didn't look smug. He looked like a guy who'd just figured out that work was actually work. Meanwhile, the fallout from that disastrous week kept showing up. The Riverside loss was permanent. 7 years of relationship building, gone because someone missed an inspection confirmation. Claire sent me a personal email about a week later, after things settled down. She said she'd liked working with us, specifically with me, but her building owners had lost confidence in the company. Nothing personal. The downtown office tower we'd almost lost decided to stay, but only after I visited their property manager in person and basically groveled. Groveling isn't my style, but neither is losing accounts because my cousin doesn't understand calendars. Mercy General settled down after I personally handled their freight elevator issue. Glenn and I had lunch about 2 weeks after I came back. He was still ticked off, but he was also practical. I almost pulled the plug, he said. You know that, right? I know. $80,000. Gone. Because your uncle decided to play Dynasty. I know that too. So what changed? I did. I'm not going to be easy to replace anymore. He looked at me for a long moment. Good. The money side of things got real during a meeting with Uncle Vinny and our accountant, a dry, precise guy named Leonard, who'd been handling our books since before I started. Leonard walked us through the costs of that week. Emergency overtime from techs scrambling to cover dispatch errors. The late fee for the Riverside inspection reschedule that never happened. Credits and discounts I'd had to offer to keep angry building managers from walking. Expedited shipping on parts that should have been ordered days earlier. But the real number was lost revenue. Riverside's contract, about 25 grand annually. Potential losses if Mercy had walked, close to 80. The downtown tower that was still evaluating, another 40. Total exposure from 1 week of Wes's management, roughly $150,000 in revenue at risk, plus about 8 grand in direct costs. Uncle Vinny sat real still while Leonard went through it. This is what it costs, I said, when you make decisions based on bloodline instead of capability. He didn't respond, just stared at the spreadsheet like it had personally betrayed him. After Leonard left, Vinny stayed in his chair. He looked older than he had a month ago. I was trying to build something for Wesley, he said finally. A future. I get that. But you tried to build it using something that wasn't yours to give. You work for me. I do. And that means you can fire me, demote me, or give my office to whoever you want. But you can't give my skills, my relationships, or my judgment to someone who hasn't earned them. Wes doesn't know these buildings. These building managers don't know Wes. That's not something you can just hand over. He was quiet for a while. My father started this company, he said. His father helped him. It's always been family. And I'm not family? That hit something. He actually flinched. You know what I mean. I do. I know exactly what you mean. Wes is your son. I'm your sister's kid. Blood is blood. But some blood is apparently thicker than other blood. He didn't respond to that. The difference, I kept going, is that I've been here for 8 years. Because I earned it. I built relationships with building managers who now ask for me by name. Wes has been here 8 months total, and he thinks he's ready to run operations because you told him he was. Silence. I'm not trying to take the company from you. I'm not trying to push Wes out. I'm trying to make sure the thing I helped build doesn't collapse because you want to hand it to someone who isn't ready. Uncle Vinny looked at me for a long moment. Something shifted in his face. Not warmth exactly, but something like recognition. You're probably right, he said finally. That was as close to an apology as I was going to get. I took it. 6 months later, the shop looked the same from the outside. Same building, same vans, same faded sign that needed replacing. But inside, everything had changed. My role was official. Operations director, authority documented, pay adjusted. Nobody was going to hand my job to a relative without consequences anymore, and everyone knew it. The raise kicked in. The on-call stipend added up. For the first time since I'd started, my paycheck actually reflected what I did. Uncle Vinny ran things by me before making decisions now. Not every decision, he was still the boss, but operational ones. He'd learned the hard way that there are things you can't see on a spreadsheet. Wes spent those 6 months learning what I'd learned in my first 2 years. The hard way. He wasn't good at it yet. Might never be great. But he was learning that competence isn't inherited. It's earned. We weren't friends. Too much history for that. The resentment was still there, under the surface. He blamed me for his demotion, and I hadn't forgotten watching him spin in my chair like a kid who'd found Dad's office. But we'd reached an understanding. He did his job. I did mine. That was enough. Hector got promoted to senior technician with a pay bump he deserved. He'd been doing the job for years without the title. I fixed that. Paulie became lead tech for our hospital accounts. He had the temperament for high-stakes situations. Glenn at Mercy actually asked for him specifically for certain jobs. I documented everything, as insurance for myself. The goal wasn't to make myself replaceable. The goal was to make replacing me so expensive and complicated that no one would try without serious thought. And if they did try again, at least I'd have records proving what I'd built. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.